Welcome to the Deep Dive, the show where we take a stack of sources and really unpack the most compelling insights for you. Today, we're embarking on a new deep dive, looking into a really foundational biblical passage.
Hmm.
It's a moment in the Gospels that, well, it's echoed through centuries, hasn't it?
Absolutely.
And it's challenged believers across all sorts of cultures. We're zeroing in on Jesus' teaching. Render to Caesar the things that are Caesar's, and to God the things that are God's.
That specific one.
Yeah.
From Matthew 22, verses 15 to 21.
Exactly. And our aim with this deep dive is, to extract the core knowledge, the insights, give you a clearer comprehension of the layers in Jesus's response. It was masterful, really.
Oh, definitely.
Especially considering it was a response to what was, for him, a very real and, frankly, incredibly clever trap. Just imagine the scene for a moment. You've got the dusty streets of Jerusalem, tension thick in the air, Roman legionaries patrolling nearby.
Yeah.
And then this seemingly innocent question gets posed to this teacher who has absolutely captivated the crowds.
But it wasn't innocent at all, was it?
Not in the slightest. It was a perfectly laid trap. You could almost call it a masterclass in political maneuvering, designed to either silence Jesus or, expose him as a revolutionary.
Right. Back him into a corner.
Mm-hmm. And yet, what actually happened wasn't Jesus walking into their snare. Instead, he just turns the tables with this single, clear statement that still speaks to us today through millennia.
It really does.
So today, we're pulling back the curtain on that specific moment.
Yeah, and that's certainly right. This passage, it reaches far beyond just a simple question about paying taxes, which is how many people might initially read it.
Right, the surface level.
Exactly. It digs into these fundamental questions of authority, like who truly owns what? And where does our ultimate allegiance, but where should it reside in this world? This teaching holds genuinely radical implications for how followers are supposed to conduct themselves, living as citizens, really, in two kingdoms simultaneously.
Two kingdoms, that's a key
Right.
concept.
It is. Think about it. We live in a world where nation-states often demand ultimate loyalty, right? Where economic systems can feel all-consuming and cultural trends kind of dictate behavior.
Mm.
And into that, this teaching offers a truly countercultural framework. It's not just about what you do with your money, but about who you are fundamentally and who you honor when you face these competing claims on your life.
There's about identity, too.
Very much so. We're
Yeah.
talking about the very bedrock of a believer's worldview, how they interact with government, their personal finances, even their very identity, like you said.
Okay, so let's unpack this calculated snare then. Let's start with the setup. The scene laid out for us in Matthew 22, it's quite the strategic maneuver by Jesus' adversaries, isn't it?
Oh, yeah. Carefully planned.
The passage tells us the Pharisees, who were, let's be honest, always looking for a way to trip Jesus up, constantly, they went and plotted how to entangle Jesus in his words. That's the phrase used. And it says plainly that Jesus was aware of their malice.
He saw right through it.
He did. They really intended to put him to the test, to force him into one of those no-win situations. They believed there was no escape.
Yeah, they weren't looking for truth. Not at all.
No, they were seeking his downfall. Plain and simple.
Precisely. And what makes this scene so striking is the unusual alliance behind the interrogation. It's a collaboration born out of shared opposition to Jesus.
That's interesting. Who were they?
Well, on one side, you have the Pharisees, a group known for their, meticulous adherence to Mosaic law, their dedication to Jewish tradition.
Right. Often clashed with Jesus.
They did. They often found themselves at odds with his teachings, viewing his interpretations and actions as, well, undermining their authority in the established religious order. Then alongside them, you have the Herodians.
Herodians. Okay.
They were a Jewish political party.
Yeah.
Their very name tells you something. Their allegiance was to Herod Antipas and, by extension, really, to Roman rule.
So more politically motivated, maybe?
Pragmatic. You can say that.
Yeah.
These Herodians were distinct because they actively supported the Herodian dynasty and the Roman presence. They were often political pragmatists who saw cooperating with Rome as the best way to maintain order and, frankly, their own influence.
Okay, so these two groups, Pharisees and Herodians, they wouldn't normally be allies, would they?
Not typically, no. One group was deeply religious and nationalist, the other politically aligned with the occupying power. For them to come together against Jesus, it really underscores the severity of their shared objective.
Which was?
To discredit him.
Yeah.
Once and for all. To neutralize his growing influence among the people. It truly shows you the extent of their apprehension about him.
Wow. Okay, so they approach him, this unlikely alliance, with this politically supercharged dilemma. They ask, tell us then what you think. Is it lawful to pay taxes to Caesar or not?
Such a loaded question.
Totally. And for the Jewish people living in their homeland at that time, this wasn't just some casual query, was it?
Not at all. They were under direct Roman rule, often brutal, always resented.
And Caesar wasn't just a king, he was emperor, claiming divine status even. That must have been a huge affront to Jewish monotheism.
A massive affront. This direct rule over their promised land by, pagan Romans, it stirred this deep indignation. It was a constant searing reminder of their subjugation.
A wound to their pride, both national and religious.
Exactly. Every interaction with Roman authority, every tax collected, every legionary walking the streets, it was a painful echo of their lost sovereignty.
So this question about the tax goes right to the heart of that pain.
It does. And it truly put Jesus on the horns of a dilemma. It was a scenario specifically designed to guarantee his downfall, one way or the other.
Okay, explain the two horns. What happens if he says yes?
Right. Horn number one, supporting the taxes. If Jesus had simply said yes, that it was lawful to pay taxes, he would have immediately undercut his popular messianic support.
Why? Because people hated the tax.
Yes, but it was deeper than just hating taxes. You see, for many Jews, paying taxes to Rome wasn't just a financial burden. It was seen as a profound religious offense.
A religious offense? How so?
Well, the Roman occupation itself was considered an illegitimate Gentile domination of God's chosen land and people. That was the baseline. Furthermore, the coins themselves, the ones used for paying the tax, they bore the image and inscription of the emperor.
The emperor who claimed to be divine.
Exactly.
Yep.
Claiming divine status. So using those coins, paying that tax, was viewed by many as idolatrous. It was like a tacit acknowledgement of Rome's authority over God's chosen people, even in a religious sense.
Okay, I see.
So a yes from Jesus would have alienated the very crowds who were hailing him as a potential liberator. It would have cast him as a collaborator with the hated Roman regime.
Undermining his spiritual authority.
Completely. It would have looked like a compromise of their faith and their national identity. A disaster for his popular support.
Okay, so that's one side of the trap, saying yes alienates his followers, but the genius, or maybe the malice of their plan, was the other side.
That's right. The other horn of the dilemma. What if Jesus said no?
Yeah, what if he said no, it's not lawful?
Well, if Jesus had simply said no, that it was not lawful to pay taxes, then the Herodians remember them.
The pro-Roman ones.
Exactly. The ones keen to maintain their position. They can immediately charge him with being a revolutionary.
Sedition.
Precisely. And this wasn't just a minor accusation. Challenging the tax was seen as an act of open rebellion against Roman authority.
And the Romans didn't take kindly to rebellion.
Not at all. The punishment was execution. And not just eventually, but swiftly. The Roman authorities would move quickly to suppress any hint of insurrection.
So it was designed so that no matter his answer, he faced severe consequences.
Exactly. Either lose his influence with the people, making his claims seem hollow, or lose his life to Roman authority, ending his public ministry.
It really was a no-win scenario. From their perspective, the stakes couldn't have been higher for Jesus in that moment.
That's the perceived brilliance there. Trap, it just seemed inescapable. But then Jesus, in turn, does something interesting. He asks them, show me the coin for the tax.
Right. He turns it back on them.
And they brought him a denarius. Now, what's compelling here is the specific coin. It was very likely a silver denarius of Tiberius Caesar.
Tiberius. Okay, so the emperor at that time during Jesus' ministry.
Mostly, yes. Tiberius ruled from AD 13 to 37, covering most of Jesus' adult life.
Yeah.
Caesar Augustus was emperor when Jesus was born, but Tiberius was the current Caesar.
And this coin, the denarius, it wasn't just currency, was it?
No, it was packed with meaning, a visible symbol of the whole conflict. You could even call it a miniature piece of Roman propaganda they had to carry around.
A powerful visual symbol then, and probably a daily affront for many Jews.
Absolutely. The denarius featured a portrait of Tiberius's head on one side. Just the picture itself, a graven image, was a direct violation of one of the 10 Commandments for devout Jews.
Okay, the image itself was a problem, but there was more, right? The inscription.
Yeah, the inscription around his head read, Chai Caesar Divi AVGS, AVGVS TVS.
Which means?
It translates to Tiberius Caesar, son of the divine Augustus.
Son of the divine Augustus. So not just a title, but a claim to divine lineage?
Exactly. Openly asserting Caesar as the son of a god.
Yeah.
A direct challenge to Jewish belief.
Wow. And what about the other side of the coin?
The reverse side typically had a feminine image, possibly the Empress Livia, depicted as the goddess Roma, or maybe Pax, the goddess of peace. And it often had the words Pontiff Maxim.
Pontifex Maximus. high priest.
Correct, signifying Caesar as the high priest of the Roman state religion.
So he's claiming political power, divine lineage, and supreme religious authority all on one little coin.
Precisely. It wasn't just a title, it was a claim to spiritual authority that directly challenged the Jewish understanding of God as the sole divine authority and the temple priesthood as his appointed spiritual leaders.
So the Roman Empire actively used these coins to promote emperor worship.
They did. It was a tool to assert their dominion, not just politically and economically, but religiously as well. So the very coin they used to pay taxes was a direct physical representation of this pagan cult.
Which made paying the tax, for many devout Jews, not just a financial burden.
But a deeply offensive religious act. Like you said earlier, it was like forcing them to carry a mini idol in their pocket, a spiritually compromising thing every single day.
Okay, so they produce this coin loaded with all this meaning. What's Jesus' first move?
Well, when they produced the coin, his initial response just cut through their plotting with surgical precision. He didn't answer their question directly at first.
What did he say?
He said, "Why put me to the test, you hypocrites?"
Ooh, straight to the heart of it.
Right. He immediately discerned their malicious intent. He saw right past the deceptive words to the deceitful hearts behind them. It was a swift call-out of their true motivations, laying bare their hypocrisy for everyone there to see.
So he exposes them first. Then what?
Well, what's fascinating here is that Jesus did not dodge the question, as some might think. He didn't fall into either horn of their dilemma.
He found a third way.
You could say that. After they identified the likeness on the coin as Caesar's, answering his question about the image Jesus delivered, his pivotal statement, "Therefore, render to Caesar the things that are Caesar's, and to God the things that are God's."
The famous line.
The famous line. And it wasn't an evasion at all. This answer, it forces us to think, doesn't it? To really consider the scope of his words.
Oh, so?
He didn't just give a simple yes or no. That would have either alienated his followers or condemned him. Instead, he gave an answer that completely elevated the discussion.
To a higher plane.
Exactly, a spiritual plane. He reframed the entire question they posed. He moved it from the realm of, petty political maneuvering to the realm of ultimate reality.
Now, this is where Jesus really pulls back the curtain on a clear spiritual truth, moving way beyond their political game. He doesn't just say, pay Caesar his due. He immediately adds that second really electrifying clause, and to God the things that are God's.
Mm-hmm.
And the unspoken assumption there, the one that must have hit his listeners like a ton of bricks, is surely that everything belongs to God. Isn't that the real moment of insight here?
Absolutely. You've hit the nail on the head. That second command isn't just like an add-on. It's the interpretive key for the whole statement.
How does that work?
Well, if you accept the biblical premise, the earth is the Lord's and the fullness thereof from Psalm 24,
Right.
then it logically simply follows that whatever belongs to Caesar also belongs to God. Ultimately.
Yeah.
This isn't just a clever retort. It's a profound theological statement. It's rooted in the very first verses of Genesis. If God created everything, then by definition, everything belongs to him. The air we breathe, the ground under our feet, the resources we manage, even the authority that Caesar wielded all originates from and ultimately belongs to the Creator.
It echoes the psalmist, doesn't it? The earth is the Lord's, and the fullness thereof, the world, and those who dwell therein.
Exactly that.
Yeah.
So Caesar might have stamped his image on a coin, claiming ownership in a sense. But the ultimate owner, the one whose image is stamped on creation itself and on humanity through the Imago Dei.
The image of God in us.
Right, that's
Yeah.
God. So your act of rendering to Caesar, paying the tax, is in a deeper sense an act of rendering to God. It clarifies a mundane civic duty as potentially an expression of ultimate allegiance.
So it's not just about money anymore.
Not at all. It's about fundamental reality, who truly owns it all.
That's fascinating. So Jesus isn't merely distinguishing between two separate realms, the sacred and the secular, saying this bit is for God, that bit's for Caesar.
No, it's more integrated than that.
He's actually sort of subsuming Caesar's realm under God's, showing that even Caesar's authority and possessions are ultimately derived from God and accountable to God.
That's a great way to put it. He's subordinating earthly authority to divine authority.
Which fundamentally reshapes how a believer views all earthly authority, doesn't it? It suggests this kind of radical dual citizenship, where our citizenship in this world is always held in tension with and subordinate to our heavenly citizenship.
Precisely. It's a citizenship that holds two allegiances in tension, but with a very clear hierarchy.
God's allegiance comes first.
Always.
Mm.
We are called to honor and obey earthly authorities, yes. Because their authority, even though it's flawed and temporary, is ordained by God for maintaining order in a fallen world. Paul talks about this in Romans 13.
Right.
But that obedience is always relativized, always limited by our ultimate allegiance to the King of Kings, to God.
So our service to Caesar, our civic duties, are ultimately done in service to God.
Ideally, yes. Unless, and this is the crucial exception, unless Caesar's demands directly conflict with God's clear commands, that's where the tension really emerges.
And where believers throughout history have faced difficult choices.
Exactly. Think about the early Christians. They were generally loyal citizens of the Roman Empire in many ways, but they absolutely refused emperor worship. Why? Because it directly conflicted with their primary allegiance to Christ.
Right. Render to Caesar what is Caesar's, but worship belongs only to God.
Precisely. Or think of later figures like Dietrich Bonhoeffer in Nazi Germany, trying to navigate the horrific demands of a totalitarian regime while holding fast to his higher calling.
So this principle, it fundamentally redefines citizenship. It's not just an obligation.
No, it transforms it into an act of worship and discernment. It's not about ignoring earthly laws, not at all.
Yeah.
But it is about filtering them through a higher divine lens. We participate, we contribute, we live peaceably as much as we can, but our ultimate identity, our ultimate loyalty, and our ultimate hope reside not in the transient kingdoms of this world,
But in the eternal, unshakable kingdom of God.
Exactly.
This brings us to a really crucial point then about Jesus' own absolute authority over everything. You know, when we think about the crucifixion story, it's easy to see Caesar, or rather the Roman Empire represented by Pilate, as the dominant force in that moment.
Earthly power certainly seemed supreme.
But the claim here, the theological reality, is that even though the earthly power of Caesar stood behind the crucifixion of Jesus, Jesus is the supreme Lord over Caesar. That's a remarkable claim, especially given the circumstances he was in when he spoke these words.
It is remarkable. And Jesus knew this truth even when he seemed at his absolute weakest, hanging on the cross. His post-resurrection declaration confirms it with stunning clarity. Remember Matthew 28:18.
All authority in heaven and on earth has been given to me.
Exactly. All authority, heaven and earth. That signifies his universal dominion. He is above all of Caesar's authority, above all earthly rulers and systems for all time.
So rendering to God the things that are God's ultimately means what? Rendering to Jesus?
Yes. Ultimately, it means rendering to Jesus the honor of absolute ownership and authority over everything, and that includes all that is Caesar's.
So our obedience to earthly powers is always in light of his ultimate rule.
Exactly. It is, in essence, an act of obedience to him, the one who establishes and dismantles nations, who raises kings and brings them low. Every coin, every realm, every reign, ultimately, it all points back to him.
And this authority isn't separate from the Father's, right? You mentioned John 10:30, he and the Father are one.
Precisely. There's a unity there.
Yeah.
And John 5:22-23 says the Father has given all judgment to the Son.
That all may honor the Son just as they honor the Father.
Right. This clarifies why, when Jesus said, render to God, he was implicitly including himself, even though he didn't explicitly name himself in that context during his earthly ministry. It points to a unified divine authority.
A singularity of purpose and dominion between the Father and the Son. Honoring one means honoring the other.
There's no division in that supreme authority.
But during his earthly ministry, Jesus didn't always wield that authority openly, did he?
No, and that's important to understand. During his earthly ministry, Jesus consciously abstained, you might say, from exercising the right and the raw power to subdue his enemies by force.
He chose instead to lay down his life.
Yes. His somewhat subtle answer about Caesar and God reflected this intentional humility, this self-limitation. He was here in his first coming to suffer and die, to accomplish a specific saving work.
Not to rule openly as an earthly king at that point.
Not yet. He knew the day would come when he would rule openly, sitting on his glorious throne before all the nations, as Matthew 25 describes it, judging all humanity.
But in that moment with the Pharisees and Herodians, he modeled a kind of humble submission, even while subtly asserting his ultimate supremacy.
Exactly. His present humility didn't negate his future ultimate authority. It actually set the stage for it. He chose the path of the suffering servant first, a quiet power that would ultimately achieve a victory far greater than any earthly conquest.
And we see that ultimate source of all earthly authority clearly stated later, don't we? When Jesus stands before Pilate, the Roman governor who has immense temporal power.
The power of life and death, seemingly.
Jesus tells him, "You would have no authority over me at all unless it had been given you from above." That's John 19:11.
A stunning statement in that context.
It establishes such a profound truth. All human authority, like Caesar's, like Pilate's, is warranted only because it is indirectly God's. It comes from God, but it is not God.
That's the key distinction.
Yeah.
It makes earthly authority legitimate in its proper sphere, but never absolute. It has a rightful place, a necessary function for order in a fallen world, but it's not the highest place.
So every decree, every law, every government structure operates under this divine allowance, accountable to the one who grants them their temporary power.
That's the biblical framework. It acts as both a validation. Yes, government has a God-given role and a critical limitation for any earthly rule.
Okay, so because God and Jesus as one with the Father hold absolute allegiance,
Yes.
then all other allegiances to nations, rulers, even employers or families, they're all relativized by this supreme allegiance.
They have to be. Earthly allegiances are warranted, they're legitimate, but they are always limited and shaped by this first primary allegiance to God.
And God actually wills that we recognize these earthly authorities.
Yes, as God ordained. Paul is clear on this, and that we shouldn't proudly kick against what he has put in place for the sake of order.
Even when those authorities are flawed or even unjust.
That's the hard part, isn't it? But the principle holds. Submission is generally the posture, unless obeying man means disobeying God directly. This perspective transforms how we view our civic duties. They aren't just grudging obligations.
But acts that, when rendered appropriately, can indirectly honor God.
Right. This divine ordering gives us a framework for how believers should engage with the world's systems, even the ones that seem unjust or oppressive. It's a call to both submission and discernment.
Recognizing that while God has ordained earthly rule for order,
He alone is the ultimate sovereign.
this raises a really vital question for you listening. There's often this perceived risk, isn't there? This natural apprehension we feel about submitting to the demands of worldly authority, especially when that authority seems unjust or burdensome, like Caesar's tax felt to the Jews.
We worry about what governments might take, what freedoms might be curtailed.
Exactly. The inconveniences, the burdens. But listen to this really startling insight that comes from reflecting on this passage, one that completely reorients our thinking. The danger to our soul from unjust secular governments is nowhere near as great as the danger to our soul from the pride that kicks against submission.
That turns our usual worries inside out, doesn't it?
It really does. It suggests the real ultimate threat isn't always external oppression.
That distinction is so critical. It truly gets to the heart of what Jesus was conveying and what Paul later elaborated on. Think about it. No amount of mistreatment from Caesar, no unjust law from Rome, or any government since has ever in itself sent anyone to hell.
Physical oppression, financial burdens, even martyrdom.
Right. These are external hardships. They can harm the body, they can drastically impact our worldly circumstances, but they cannot by themselves condemn the soul.
What?
But pride and rebellion, these internal postures of defiance against God's established order, against God himself, that is what sends people to hell, everyone who doesn't have a savior.
Wow. So it reorients our focus completely, away from just the external political pressures or frustrations with earthly rulers.
And onto the internal state of our own soul. Our humble submission, first and foremost, to God's ordained order, recognizing his sovereignty above all.
So God wills that we glorify him as the only supreme sovereign.
Yes, the King of all kings.
While also recognizing and not proudly rebelling against the authorities he has put in place. Knowing their legitimacy, however limited and imperfect, comes ultimately from him.
That's the balance. This teaches us that true freedom, true spiritual safety, isn't found in just defying all authority. It's found in a humble, righteous recognition of the ultimate authority that rests with God alone.
So the greatest battle, then, is often not against the external Caesars of our time,
but within our own hearts, against the sin of pride and rebellion.
Okay, so to kind of recap our deep dive today, Jesus' answer to that seemingly simple but actually very loaded question about taxes, it fundamentally redefined the question itself, didn't it?
Completely shifted the ground.
It moved from being a political trap to becoming this profound declaration of God's absolute ownership over all things, and that includes Caesar's domain.
Caesar's realm is contained within God's realm.
So, rendering to Caesar, paying your taxes, fulfilling civic duties, it ultimately becomes an expression of rendering to God. It's acknowledging his ultimate sovereignty over all creation.
Yes, and it reminds us that even the mundane acts of civic duty are ultimately, or should be, expressions of our allegiance to the King of Kings.
Okay, that brings us to a final thought, something for you, the listener, to consider beyond our discussion today.
Yeah, chew on this, perhaps. How does really recognizing God's absolute ownership over everything, and I mean everything, even the things we tend to think of as ours?
Our time, our money, our talents.
Exactly. Our very lives. How does internalizing that truth alter our perspective on our daily choices, on how we handle our possessions, on where our true allegiances lie in today's complex world?
When we truly grasp that everything is God's, how might that genuinely change the way we steward our resources, or pursue our aspirations, or engage with the demands society places on us?
It's a question worth pondering deeply.
It is. We really encourage you to reflect on this powerful biblical account, Matthew 22, and how it prompts a spirit of humility and maybe a reevaluation of what or who truly claims your ultimate allegiance. Thank you so much for joining us on the deep dive on Reformed Thinking.